TOA community, welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Robert Linkle, trainingtheolderadult.com. On the road, I'm here in San Jose teaching a local gym here called Method 3. If you're ever in the area, you want to get a good workout in, they're fantastic. Great owner, John, great staff, head coaches, Keith and Sue, really great people. So if you're ever in the area, go check them out, Method 3. So what I want to talk to you about today, Silver Sneakers had this email that came out the other day. Caught my eye. It was the #1 exercise for developing glute and lower body leg strength. And right away I thought, oh, please don't screw this up, right? Like there's definitely a right answer in my opinion. And they nailed it. So good job, Silver Sneakers. That's 2 in a row that I have agreed with you. And I'm very happy with what you've put in here. It's it's a really good progression that they went through. So I think they're maybe leveling up their content here a little bit. It makes me happy. So don't let the name scare you. Of course, deadlift, it could be a little terrifying to think of that. It's some of those videos you see where they go, if you actually did what the exercise was called and it was like box jumps and someone's holding a box and jumping up and down and they're like cleans and someone's got a broom and they're cleaning and it says, rope climbs and it's, somebody climbing a rope. Anyway, that was a bad example. You know what I mean, right? Some fun with this. We're not actually lifting the dead, but that's where some of these names came from a Romanian deadlift versus a traditional deadlift, apparently on the battlefields back in the day. The Romanians or the Romans or whoever initiated the first initial stiff leg deadlift would not bend at the knees when they picked up their dead off the battlefield. They developed more hamstring development and glute development than those that did squat all the way down, bend their knees, bend at the hip. And thus, every time the Olympic Games would come around or sprints or challenges of anything where people had to race, the ones that did more stiff leg deadlifts or Romanian deadlifts or Roman deadlifts, whatever you want to call them, stiff legs that were hamstring focused, they were typically faster sprinters. And thus, these names were kind of developed. These are all just, stories, of course, myth stories to help sell some points. But yeah, don't let the name scare you in the deadlift. It's actually probably one of the best things that you can do. They go into a little bit of detail, giving you some explanation on what this is used mostly for. And we did an analysis once amongst my clients and 2 other gyms, and we found that our average client was performing about 100. No, so on average, so it was during 8 hours of sleep. So we had 16 wake hours, and during those 16 hours, they were performing over 100 hinges a day. So that was 7 hinges per hour, if I'm remembering all my math right. Again, I'm no math expert, but a lot of hinges. This could be as simple as picking up my shoes off the floor, hinging over to grab my purse off the countertop, grabbing my suitcase, picking up a piece of paper that I dropped or my wallet or whatever it is. These are all hinges. Anytime you break at the hip, okay, hinge at the hip, you are performing a hinge. You could be squatting, you could be stiff leg, breaking at the hip, stiff leg, hinging, not bending your knees, all, a variation of the same movement pattern. With or without load, these are stressors that our bodies need to be good at. We practice them often other than general locomotion, just moving our bodies about through space, walking, if you will. The hinge is the most commonly performed primary action that we do. So knowing that, this is something that we train, especially us, TOA, we train in-house every single workout. There's some hinge for sure, if not multiple hinges. We want our clients to be very good at these because we know how much they're going to apply to real life. And I need to keep you strong and capable and able of doing that forever, all the way through 90s, 100s, and beyond, okay? When we look at the progression they're about to show you, it starts with something just as simple as me just sitting in this chair. I'm going to take you through this, and they really do a good job of talking about leverage and using different levers to make the stress of this movement more efficient or more effective and more stress loading. This is good stress, and building up to the point where you do eventually use some weight. So they take you through this. I want to put it all on here so you can kind of see the whole progression. These variations not necessarily make it easier or harder, but they're great variations to learn how to do this, how to challenge yourself as we go. So the first one is a seated hip hinge. Okay, so I wanted to demo some of these. That's why I'm in the little rolly chair in here. Now the seated hinge, you can make this as simple as you want with your knees bent okay, and your feet flat on the floor. And then you can have your arms, right, just kind of sitting at the side and simply hinge forward without rounding your back, and then come back, right? Come back to the vertical position. So this is a hinge. This is basically a seated good morning at this point, right, is what I would be doing. Okay, so now from here, how can we make this one just a tiny bit harder? I can put my legs out straight, toes pulled up, what we call dorsiflexion. And when I go to hinge, ooh, I get a lot more hamstring stretch now because I've put my hamstrings on tension, on tight, right? So I'm feeling that hamstring by straightening my legs, feeling my hamstrings kick in. Maybe I can't hinge as far because I'm pre-stretching this musculature along the backside of my body. The key to this though is that I don't want to round over when I do it. I want to keep my chest up and hinge, push forward into this, getting that big hamstring stretch on the back and then returning. So now what they talk about with this in the next step is utilizing arms into an extended position or a longer lever. So I could do this same very first one with my knees bent, my hands across my chest, feel the challenge to this. And then if I put my hands up above my head, that's a little bit harder. And then if I put my arms out in front of me, that's even harder. Basically, I'm just moving load from being close to my center axis, a little further away with a longer lever for me to pull with my hamstrings and my erectors and my lower back. And then if I put my arms out all the way out in front, right, it's an even longer lever. So it's just a way for me to baby step up that movement. Then I could do the whole same thing again with my legs out straight. Here's my basic hinge, my hands in close. Then I feel that, and then I put my hands over my head. I can feel that, and then I can put my arms out in front of me. Ooh, I even feel that. And so we're gonna take that same progression, right? And they're gonna go into a standing hip hinge. So we'll get rid of the chair, and we're gonna do that same action. So I'm gonna have my hands across my chest and go into my hinge. Okay, I can work that position. Then I can put my hands next to my head or behind my head. I'll hinge, that's a little harder. And then I can put my arms out. And as I hinge, the longer levers that reach out creates a greater stress. There's more weight further away, creating a longer lever, right? Maximizing our body's load as a general extension of weight, right? To the point where we build up enough confidence to, number 5, add load. And that's where most of the time, like, that's where I'm going. I got to get people here pretty quick. But I really liked this progression. I liked it enough that I wanted to share it with all of you, where naturally we kind of think, oh, the first hinge we should do is a bridge. We'll lay down on the ground, you break at the hip, it's deloaded, right? There's no vertical pressure. Like, that's a pretty efficient and pretty good way to bridge, to hinge and not stress your lower back. And it is. From there, what's the next step? We can adjust the bridge with our feet elevated and then eventually with our shoulders elevated like a hip thrust. And then what? Well, if we come upright and people aren't ready for that big of a jump, well, let's try the seated position. The seated forward position. Good morning. Okay, we could try that. And then adjusting the hands, maybe even holding a load, a 5 or a 7.5 pound dumbbell at our chest while we do this. And just these baby steps, I call them tweeners. They're exercises between each step. You're like, well, we do a bridge, and then we do a foot elevated bridge, and then we do a shoulder elevated bridge, a hip thrust, and then we go to standing. And you're like, well, there's probably 12 other things that I could sprinkle in between each of those to make it just a little bit harder, but not quite the next jump, right? So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, I want 1A, 1B, 1C. Then there's 2, 2A, 2B, 2C. Then there's 3, right? What are those little betweeners that just help me inch this up? That's what this little progression was right here. And I haven't seen another publication that isn't, a research article go into depth like this and talk about it like this to the general consumer. So as soon as I saw this, I said, this deserves at least a 10-minute little clip to just kind of talk about it, get the information out there, share it with people, especially with our community, because I'm always looking to give you these extra little bits with good explanation as to why we would want to practice this. So if you're not ready to just walk into the weight room, stand over a kettlebell, properly pick it up like the dead, right, doing a deadlift, what are some of the variations you could do to start off and build up the strength to do it? If you haven't been in a weight room in 20 years or you haven't been in one ever and you want to just start learning how to properly hinge, start with your seated position, cross your hands across your chest, and basically bow, hinge forward and back. Notice I keep saying hinge, not bend, okay? Because bending your spine and hinging at the hip are two very different movement patterns. Rounding my back puts my vertebrae and my erectors in my back in a really vulnerable and uncomfortable position. that like a copper wire, I could bend and then straighten and bend and straighten and bend and straighten a billion times. And at some point, I'm going to bend it and it's going to break. Okay. And it's because gravity's pulling down on me. It's stacking everything up and I'm getting this gravitational pulled pressure with all of my body weight straight through my spine. But if I get on the ground and I'm either on my hands and knees doing a cat-cow or a camel-cow or whatever you call it in yoga, right? Now I'm 4-point supported and my vertical pressure through my spine is now horizontal. So that pressure between each vertebrae is really decompressed. Well, now I can work mobility through my spine, right? And not be in such a vulnerable position. So it's not that I don't want you to be mobile. I just don't want you to work mobility with load in hand while you're in a hinging position. That's not the time to work on thoracic mobility or lumbar mobility, which I personally don't feel like you should have. I think your lumbar, the bottom 5 vertebrae of your spine, are not designed to rotate and or move, okay? People will debate this and argue it, but I personally feel like they are not designed to rotate or move. They are the center point of your whole body's mobility, and they should be stable and still. And I think that's why they look the way they look. They're really big and thick. The facet joints are very spread out, okay? And they are designed to have everything stacked on them and move about them, but not to independently swivel and move on their own. When you start to do that, that's when you really start to cause more damage to the discs in between than you would see higher in the thoracic, cervical and thoracic spine and vertebrae that are flatter. The facet joints are longer and connect a little bit more efficiently. And they're designed almost like pivot points. They look like little spaceships that can just work amongst each other. That's why this creation of mobility in my neck through my shoulders is designed to move efficiently that way. Where in my lumbar, moving my hips side to side, not so much, right? Again, that's my opinion. I think there's a lot of research to support that. But there are people that will disagree with that. And to each their own. When you've had enough back injuries like I've had and seen enough, we start to do different practices to say, hey, why don't we keep the center of mass still and let's move everything else about it. Think of it like a puppet, right? The puppet, the arms will move and the legs will move like, oh, whoa, geez, earthquake. All this stuff will move independently. But what doesn't move? The body in the middle. The body in the middle is the center point where everything articulates off of it. So that's why it looks like that when you see the puppets moving, right? Their legs are moving, okay? Their legs are moving, their arms are moving. What's not moving? The center of mass stays put. I kind of believe, I know not that we're puppets, but I feel like that's a strategy or a philosophy to think, like, let me keep my lumbar spine, my true center of mass, which is about 2 inches below your belly button, 2 inches above your pelvic bone, right? That's about your center of mass, where your body is equaled in weight. If we were to put you on our finger and spin you, that's where you would want to be, just below the belly button. And I would say you're evenly balanced. I could balance the 2x4, if you will, right? That position, if I could stabilize that and then move and articulate everything else around it, I think people would stay pretty healthy. They'd be pretty strong. So that's kind of a center point that we practice, being still and stable and strong and agile around that, but keeping that center protected. And there's valsalvic pressure via breathing. There's muscular support just via your core being strong from loaded carries and different core work that we do, to every other locomotion and push, pull, squat, lunge, twist, press, other angles and actions that we do to help you be strong there. So at the root of all of this is simply breaking at the hip, hinging at the hip. That's one of the most basic movement patterns that you can do. I want you to be good at it. And if this helped you learn some of those steps and practice some of those, then that's fantastic. You have any comments, questions, hit me up down below. I'm more than happy to answer. Please feel free to share this with your friends and family members, anybody that you feel like could benefit from this. Please subscribe to the channel, like us, hit that little bell up there that'll alert you anytime I put up any new information. We would love to have you as a regular here, helping us grow our channel. Much love and appreciation to all of you. Until next time, continue to fight your good fight against sarcopenia, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace, everybody. Thank you.